I go on to say that under the Geneva Conventions, what people don't realise, everyone's talking about, you're in breach of the Geneva Conventions, but what people don't normally realise is that Article 146 of the Geneva Conventions says that penalties apply, and it's up to the signatories of the Geneva Conventions to ensure that those responsible are prosecuted. And under the Hague Convention of 1907, which still applies, under Article 35, I think it was 3, I can't remember exactly, but under Article 3, the prosecution takes place, and if the individual responsible is found guilty, then he can be liable to pay compensation. Therefore, Mr. Blair, Mr. Hume, Mr. Straw, all those people who have broken the Geneva Convention, as we have seen, could be personally liable to lose their property. This, we must ensure eventually happens, the sooner the better. The Geneva Conventions, if they're worth the paper they're written on, when you have a law, you have effect when you break the law. Otherwise, you might just as well tear the Geneva Conventions up. And we should look at all the Geneva Conventions, all the articles. And I can assure you that Article 146 of the Geneva Conventions and Article 3 of the Hague Convention of 1907 actually says that all these people who've broken the law should be personally liable. That was my comment on that film. On the other film, the long film, I'm delighted and thank Haifa for showing it, because I met Professor Gunther in Switzerland in the summer of last year, and I sat with the Iraqi United Nations ambassador in Geneva. The three of us sat there, and what this, unfortunately, it's a much longer film. It's 1 hour and 30 minutes, and I hope that this 1 hour and 30 minutes film can be shown eventually. Obviously, this evening we had to cut it down to 1/3 of its length, so it lost an awful lot. What the last picture showed was of a boy of 11 years old who had lymphoma, and what the film ends with is that boy that you saw, a charming boy, the next 2 days he was dead. And Professor Gunther and I and the Iraqi, we just wept. And I vowed that that film would be shown in this country.
When was that, sorry? When was that? Last summer?
Last summer.
And the Iraqi ambassador went?
Yeah. The ambassador in Geneva. We went. It is so harrowing. What you didn't see in that film is, I think, the most important aspect of it. That the last quarter of an hour of the film shows that the dust from Basra is blowing into Erbil in the north of Iraq, and nobody can understand why cows are producing calves with 2 heads. The leukemia cases are rising 40 times what they were before this ghastly war. And so the German team under Professor Gunther has done a study of Erbil, where no depleted uranium weapons are used. And they consulted a meteorologist who said that in the summer there are sandstorms that blow the sand from Basra northwards into the Kurdish areas. And this seems to me the most terrible of all things that's happening. That the sand is so light, it just blows up in a cloud and lands in other parts of Iraq, and is causing the same cancers and terrible things in the north.
Scientifically, is this proven?
Sorry, we will have half an hour discussion after questions, and we will have the whole panel there, so after we finish, it's okay.
So I'm delighted that this film has been shown for the first time in London, and I hope that eventually we'll have time to see the whole of it. The government, this government, I have a friend in the House of Lords. I've shown this film to several MPs. There was only one response from George Galloway. Ironically, the only very good response is from the House of Lords. Lord Nicholas Reid, 3 weeks ago, asked a question of the Ministry of Defence about the state of depleted uranium dust in South Iraq, and he got the standard reply from the MOD: there is no connection, no scientific proof of the connection between depleted uranium and birth defects or cancers. And that's in Hansard, you can look it up, of last month. I tried to get the film shown in the BBC, Channel 4. The Independent write an article about it. No one wants to know. This film is, you like putting a bomb on the tip. We don't want to know. So this is the first time the London audience has seen it. Last week, 10 people in Brighton saw it, but this is the first time. And I think it's very important that you must see the whole of it.